All right, welcome back to the podcast. Appreciate you finding us. College football is here. Opening week, week zero over in Ireland this weekend. Georgia Tech, Florida State. Hopefully, you're going to enjoy our conversation with Jeff Colhane, voice of the Seminoles, as he is headed over to Ireland to call the action. And now we're going to talk to another guy who's involved in the SEC. We're going to give you a little SEC preview live from Knoxville, Tennessee, home of the Tennessee Volunteers. My man, my Tampa guy, 99.1 The Sports Animal, morning host, 6 to 9 a.m., play-by-play voice of the newly minted national championship baseball program in Tennessee. So welcome in Vince Ferrara, and congratulations on a national title there.
Man, appreciate it. It's crazy. It has resonated throughout all athletics. And we went to Dallas for SEC Football Media Day, me and Josh Ward, one of the other hosts on our station, when we're flying Knoxville and Dallas, like anyone that we would see, and they would have Tennessee baseball gear on. And the first thing that they would ask us about is Tennessee baseball. We're still get people asking about the transfer portal for baseball and recruiting and the renovations. Like that stuff would never happen even last year when they had some sustained success. So it's been a game changer. It's opened up even more excitement for Tennessee football because now the thought is, hey, why can't we do it? I know it's been a
Right.
long time, but why can't we do it when baseball had never done it and they broke through? So it's been a game changer for sure. So yeah, exciting time right now.
Yeah, no doubt. And Vince does a lot of great work. He does some high school work in the Knoxville area. He's all over the Tennessee football program, covering it, and press conferences and all such. So we'll get to that here in a second. All right, let's. I'm going to give you a couple of storylines of the SEC and let me know if I've missed anything. One,
Okay.
obviously, Texas and Oklahoma finally here in the conference. Two, no divisions. You're going to have basically the best two teams are going to play each other in Atlanta as opposed to East and West champions. And then three, obviously, the exit of the legend, Nick Saban. Are there any other big storylines that you got on your mind that maybe that's not one of those three?
Well, no, I think you hit on the big ones, and then the other one that is not exclusive to the SEC, and that's the college football playoff. And how many more teams now have that under their consideration going in? We talked to a player last week. We asked him what he was most excited about the season, and he said the college football playoff being expanded because he feels like there's no reason why they can't make it and that they're close and SEC, all those kind of things. So I think that's going to be a national storyline that will be a part of the SEC because look, you can be in the top 15 like Tennessee, they're 15 in the coaches and AP poll. That's good for seventh in the SEC. And that's not that far away from a playoff position
Yeah.
being at 15. Now, realistically, as you know, Jason, there's going to be a couple of conference champions that won't fall in the top 12. Since they'll be on the outside, that means you basically got to be at least in the top 10. So it is still in the conversation. It just tells you how many schools feel like they have a shot. But no, you hit on the big ones. There's always the coaching changes. That's always something to keep track of. Obviously, Alabama, as you mentioned, with Nick Saban and Texas A&M. So yeah, there's different, and then another one I would say is the hot seat one
Yeah.
where Florida and Arkansas have that to discuss also and to keep track of. So yeah, Mississippi State, another new head coach with Jeff Levy, who is very familiar,
Yeah.
worked with Josh Heupel at UCF up the road up I-4. So yeah, those would be a couple of others, but you hit on the big ones.
Let's get to where you're at in Knoxville. Talk about just a quick little preview of Tennessee. Obviously, got the era of Nico is finally here full time. Joe
Mm-hmm.
Milton gone. Josh Heupel's done a great job in his first couple of years there. They've been very competitive defensively. Need some improvement. It seems like they're getting there. Had a huge recruit just commit to them in the last couple of days. Huge
Yep.
offensive lineman for next year. Just give me a quick synopsis of where Tennessee is with Nico.
Yeah, for sure. And David Sanders Jr. is who you're talking about, number 3 or 4 overall player in the 2025 class. He was a guy they had to get, and they already have in some recruiting rankings the top guy in 2026 in Faison Brandon, a quarterback. So yeah, recruiting is going pretty well for them, better than even they've done in recent years, which has not been bad. But as far as this year, yeah, it's the Nico show, and fans are ready for that last year. but he was okay with not playing last year. He knew he had to learn the offense, and it was so different for him at the beginning. And they asked so much of the quarterback. Plus, he had to fill out and get bigger, and he does look noticeably bigger. I think there's still work to do to add to that frame because he's 6'6", still kind of looks like a volleyball player, which he played in high school. And you're gonna take some big shots, but he is so elusive. Had the 3 rushing touchdowns in Orlando in the Cheez-It Citrus Bowl. And it's not going to be that way every game. But this guy can throw on the run. His deep ball accuracy, I think, will be at a much higher clip than we saw from Joe Milton. And I think it'll look closer to what it did 2 years ago with Hendon Hooker because of the ability to make plays, busted plays, some design runs here and there, and then the deep ball accuracy. That's the way it was a couple of years ago and they took a step back, although not awful. It wasn't what they needed it to be because they don't have a top 10 type of defense. Now, their defensive line, if you just look at that group and you include James Pierce Jr., that group is maybe second in the SEC behind Georgia, which I think puts it maybe top 5-ish in the country.
Yeah.
I think they're that good. They're that deep. Rodney Garner can go 12, 13 that he will play in a game.
Wow.
He's always played a lot of guys, but those are guys he trusts. There's some 5 stars in there that are just kind of trying to work their way up the pecking order. A ton of experience, the most experienced group in the conference. And then you have a guy that ESPN just named as the #1 player in college football in James Pierce Jr. as the rush. He's the top pass rusher returning in college football this year, projected top 5, top 10 pick in next year's draft. Crazy thing is he can get better. And if they can get another guy to be a threat rushing the passer, then he will be pretty dynamic. They get Jackson Moy and Arion Carter as their 2 linebackers back, both missed time due to injury last year. A lot of turnover in the back end is really where their question mark is,
Okay.
Jason. Jermon McCoy is, I think, an excellent addition in the portal from Oregon State. He'll be at corner, but they could have a lot of some unknown commodities in the rest of that DB room, including a walk-on in Will Brooks. So they got some other guys on scholarship, but guys not ready to take that role. They kind of trust Will Brooks a little bit more. They lost Jordan Thomas, who was projected to be their starting star. That's the only guy that has been lost for the season. But they've kind of been maybe the biggest storyline for Tennessee in this preseason camp has been they've had a lot of guys kind of banged up, nicked up, and held back. Now, some of that is because they've been nicked up. Some of that is because in certain positions they're not very deep. So they've been holding guys back. Like Dylan Sampson had just a little bit of a knee thing, and they've been holding him back. And they are not deep there. They're still Peyton Lewis, their 4-star freshman. He hasn't been full go yet in camp. And Cam Seldon, who was good in the bowl game, he's not been able to practice yet. That'll probably go into the season. They had another walk on at sort of at running back first team. So there are a couple positions that they're pretty thin. Offensive line, they really haven't had their starting 5 go yet. They're much better, I think, and deeper at wide receiver. So that's another reason why you may see them be closer to 2022. And then the 3 tight ends this year, I think that will be an upgrade from what they saw with the 2 guys that they had last year, both of which are in the NFL, by the way. But I do think this will be a better, more explosive offense, outstanding defensive line, really good coaching. They develop players, but a couple of positions that are thin that kind of make you nervous a little bit. And if things don't break their way, that it could be troublesome at different periods in the year.
So yeah, watch the back end. It sounds like the secondary looks like watch out for the back end on defensively. All right, let's go to Georgia. Obviously, the consensus #1 team in the country. You were at media days. Everybody loves Georgia, Carson Beck, and that whole crew back. Obviously, one sneaky thing that most people don't realize: Georgia has a brutal road schedule at Kentucky, at Alabama, at Texas, at Ole Miss. Just from you being at media day, I mean, what is the talk about Georgia? And you think they're going to be obviously the it's them in Texas for in most people's minds. What are your thoughts on Georgia?
I think they're a machine. I think they had well I think I know they had the most players, excuse me, on the All SEC team. I want to say 13, something like that, with Texas just a little bit behind them. But they have the best quarterback and maybe the best player in Carson Beck. So that, to me, you can go position by position and compare them with anybody else, even around the country. And maybe you would take the top guy at a position from another school over Georgia's, but the one that matters is quarterback. And there isn't anyone I would take over Carson Beck. There also isn't a coach I would take over Kirby Smart. And so when you've got the depth that they do, even if you don't have the number one guy at a specific position throughout, they still can sustain a lot more. I think they can handle the schedule. They're always good up front on the offensive and defensive lines. Kind of a little bit similar to what I was referring to at Tennessee. When you're good at the line of scrimmage, and you're good at quarterback, and you're good at coaching, that's a good base, and you can kind of figure some other things out if you get some bumpy waters. Georgia can sustain it because of the talent that they've got. And those are all really strong positions for them. Their defense is going to be really salty. They don't have the elite running back, Trevor Etienne, coming over from Florida.
Yep.
Probably be their guy. So, yeah, there's some other teams you'd probably take a running back room over them. But they've always got 4 and 5 stars ready to go that you never heard of that will step in and do the deal. So I still trust them by far more than anyone, even though, to your point, the schedule is much more challenging than last year.
And the good thing for Georgia now, you could lose 1 or 2 games and still make the playoff. Even if they were to stumble in a couple of those road games, you can still make the playoffs at 10-2. Go to the SEC title game. You probably can't lose 3 games, but you could lose 2 games and probably still make it, especially with that kind of schedule that they're facing. All right, give me a quick thought on Texas, Oklahoma. Obviously, all the hype around Texas. Quinn Ewers, Sarkisian, Arch Manning in the wings a little bit. You think the Texas hype is real?
I believe in Texas. Yeah. Last year they proved it. They got to the college football playoff. And so that you could go ride the narrative. Oh, we always hear it every year with Texas, just like people always say, and it there in the state of Florida. Yeah, we hear it every year with Miami. Okay, Miami still needs to do it. Texas did it last year.
Yep.
And Sarkisian has really connected there, not only with the players he has been in recruiting, he's somehow been able to get Arch Manning to be okay in his reserve role and not make that an issue, because he very well could have, or he could have bounced and gone somewhere else. So I think that's a positive. The biggest drawback for Texas is the injuries they've had at running back.
Yes.
in Baxter and Christian Clark. Their top 2 guys both going down within like a 6-day period.
And out for the year, not just down, but out for the year.
Exactly right. So that's a concern for me now. Now, does Quinn Ewers try to do too much and play hero ball, or is Sarkisian in that offense, do they rely on the pass too much?
Right.
And then it gets them out of where, because they're really good at the line of scrimmage. I mean, they've got a first round tackle, and they're good at the line of scrimmage. So they better have somebody ready to run the rock, and they better not abandon that if they do. So that's a little bit of a concern, but I trust them more than I do Oklahoma. Another big difference between the two is the schedule.
Right.
Texas has a much easier schedule than Oklahoma.
Right.
Now, I know everybody talks about Florida's schedule, but when you add up the projected win totals, I haven't done it with the latest ESPN FBI, but the one that came out earlier this summer, you add up the projected win totals of all their opponents for everybody in the league, and Oklahoma's opponents had the most wins projected. That tells me it's an awfully strong schedule. It is much different than Texas. They, much like Tennessee, have a new starting quarterback with 1 start in a bowl game under his belt, in Jackson Arnold. Now, some that play up Oklahoma say, well, that's why Dylan Gabriel left, is because he knew he was losing his gig to Jackson Arnold because he's that good. Well, maybe so. If you get that Jackson Arnold, then you can get something going. I don't think Oklahoma is as good as Texas at the line of scrimmage. Right. I don't think they're as good as Texas defensively. There's still talent there, especially at the skill spots. And if Arnold is all that, yeah, they can still win some games and not look like they don't belong in the SEC. But man, that game with Tennessee to open up SEC play for
Yes.
Oklahoma and for Tennessee, Jason, that's going to be one of the biggest overreaction games in the league. Florida Miami is up there too now because
Yep.
we know how that'll go for both fan bases, win or loss. But I think that's the case for Tennessee at Oklahoma with Josh Heupel returning there, especially on Oklahoma side. Let them lose to their former quarterback in Josh Heupel in Tennessee. And if Nico wins that game in his first conference game, watch the national attention
Oh yeah.
absolutely multiply. So that's to me is big a game in sending Tennessee from 9 wins or 10 wins in deciding that. So it's huge, but Oklahoma is a notch down below Texas in my opinion.
So you were at media days, obviously out in Dallas. Talk about the hype of the two teams that are a little bit off the radar, but getting plenty of attention. Everybody thinks these two teams are going to be legit. Soft schedules for both of them. Missouri and Ole Miss.
I believe in Ole Miss more than I do Missouri, and I know it's not easy. It doesn't make sense to bring in so many new players through the portal like Lane Kiffin does and have it work year after year. I think it will because of the players that they've brought in and because a lot of it is more on the line of scrimmage and in defense. So it's not like he's just bringing in skill players and then
Right.
trying to outscore people.
Hell, he
He
lost his best skill player in Judkins.
That's right. Went to Ohio State with Henderson. So yeah, they are still really good at wide receiver, at quarterback. I think Jackson Dart continues to get incrementally better. He to me is really solid. And then a lot of what they did in the portal, including a kid who played his senior in high school in Knoxville. I called some of his games in Walter Nolan and
Right.
coming over from Texas A&M. They addressed the defense crazy. A couple of Tennessee players went there for a cup of coffee, and Tyler Barron and McDonald and a couple other guys went there, and then they moved on to Louisville. But yeah, to me they're more trustworthy. Their schedule is a little bit more challenging than Missouri. The biggest thing with Missouri is they have a lot of the quote unquote bottom feeders, the teams that don't have the highest expectations in the league. Yeah, and to be fair, Tennessee has some of those too. The Arkansas, the Texas A&M, Mississippi State. They're loaded with those kind of teams, but they don't have a Georgia on their schedule.
Right.
That's what makes it easier for Missouri. They lost a fair amount from last year. They still have Luther Burden, a third, a wide receiver who is as good as it gets in the country. Brady Cook is outstanding as a quarterback. We'll see. The running back position worries me a little bit unless they have another Cody Schrader that
Right.
we don't know about. I mean, we didn't know about him last year. So, we'll see. They're always confident. They're always talking like we're going to shock people, shock the world there in Columbia. But I do think Ole Miss will be better than Missouri.
And with Ole Miss, obviously their issue obviously is on the defensive end. And can Lane Kiffin win big games? That's been his knock. That he's we know what kind of offensive play caller he is, and head coach, and dynamic and personality. But he just has never seemed to win the big game when they need to win one.
Outside of a bowl game, because he did beat Penn State last year,
Yeah,
but
but that's
it's a bowl game. Yeah.
So, all right, give me a team. Let's go to Kalen DeBoer, Alabama. Obviously, following the legends always the hardest thing to do. Do you think he's up for the task? And do you think what's the biggest thing coming from a guy who's not been in this conference? Give me one thing that he's probably going to experience that he's going to say, "Damn, I didn't think about that," or "I didn't think this was going to part of the gig."
Scrutiny, because it's just on a different level. Having been there, having been in the SEC, it is turned up, and
Especially with that fan base.
for sure. And look, for some, they have bought in. They want to believe there's so much in place, the resources. He's done a great job in recruiting. He did the best he possibly could in the portal. A number of Washington guys, but man, they still did a nice job in filling it, and they still have a ton of talent. So that's why I'm I don't think it's going to be a national championship, but I don't think they're going to fall off like some think they will. And there's probably a little hope in some people
Yeah.
that they fall off in their projections. So they also have some challenges on their schedule too. But I think they'll be really good at the skill positions on offense. I worry about their secondary a little bit because they did have a lot of turnover in the
Yep.
portal, and I don't think they replaced it quite to the level like they did at wide receiver and
Right.
offensive line and stuff. So that secondary could be an issue
Caleb
for you.
Downs goes to Ohio State. They lose Terry
Right.
Arnold to the draft. I mean, they lose some two massive impact guys back in the secondary.
That's exactly right. So, and then Jalen Milroe, is there another step for him? I don't think Jalen Milroe last year, and it's not even like it was a full season. We know that was a last back half of the year, but there needs to be another step for him. It can't just be spectacular game and then kind of get through or any reverting back. And look, we see that sometimes in this league. We see it. Guys get humbled and you think they're on the ascend and then it either levels off or it drops back for whatever reason. We've seen it. So there has to be another level there for him, but they still got a ton of talent on that roster.
All right, listen to Vince Ferrara, 99.1, the sports animal, Knoxville, giving a little SEC preview. Got a couple more for you, Vince, and I'll get you out of here.
Mm-hmm.
Give me a team that's not gonna win, that's not gonna be playing in Atlanta at the end, not gonna be in the playoff, but it's gonna be a pain in the neck for some people. That's a 7-5, 8-4 kind of team. We think improvements in Gainesville, or is it enough to be a pain in the neck? Kentucky's been a pain in the neck the last several years, but give me a team that you like to be a pain in the neck that maybe necessarily won't be in the mix to win the conference.
It's a great question. There isn't, and a lot of times I do have a clear one pick. This is my pick, but there's still unknowns about a couple of these teams, and I'll throw them out there. I guess I'll start with Texas A&M,
Right.
and the reason why I would say them is because of the upside with Connor Wegman at quarterback. He was a highly rated guy. He's played well when he's played. He's just been injured. So I think that upside at quarterback could make them maybe better than what a lot of people project them. They've also been hit by the portal with a lot of departures. They've had some coming in also. And you just never know with Elko how different it's going to look. So they're kind of in that conversation. Another one that I would say is LSU because of how experienced Garrett Nussmeier is at
Right.
quarterback, and they still have talent there. Now they also very active in the portal. I think they'll still be very good on offense. They still have really good receivers, even though they lost two first rounders last year and Neighbors and Brian Thomas. But what they weren't able to get in the portal was the defensive line help, which is such a very critical position. And that's where Brian Kelly was going off about the whole portal and don't come here if you're just looking for money, that kind of thing. And another one that I would say is maybe Auburn.
Okay.
And I think because they have a chance to be improved at quarterback, they're settled a little bit more at quarterback. They're good at running back, and have some trust still in Hugh Freeze to get more out of his roster. They're not great at quarterback, I don't think, but I think that's a team that doesn't have such an impossible schedule. They've got some tough teams that they can't kind of be a little bit better than what people think. So maybe not the upside, but still in that pain in the butt type of group.
Billy Napier, if in your view, is it just a matter of when, or do you think Napier can save his job this year?
I would be surprised. Obviously, they got to start out strong, or
Got to
else
win that Miami game. I mean, you almost have to win the Miami game.
because Jason, it's not just the fans because the fans are going to have their temperature and their timetable to get rid of you, but it's the people in the locker room.
Right.
That to me is on shaky ground already. I mean, look at how they've played the last couple of years in the dumb penalties they have and things like not always looking like when they're getting routed like they're still interested. So
Mm-hmm.
you lose that game, and then you still have everything you have in front of you on the
Yeah.
schedule. That would be really tough to overcome. The question to me is when they play all those ranked teams at the end of the year, I mean, it starts basically October, but then November is on another level, ridiculous. Like, how many of those games is Billy Napier even coaching?
Right.
So I think it's going to be very tough for him. They better be pretty special with some talent, and I don't think they have the talent that they used to, kind of like the Georgias and the Alabamas and those guys. Where hey, you haven't heard of them, but they're really good. Well, I think he's done better in recruiting since last year, but you're not going to see the payoff for them in another year or two. So he may not see the fruits of that labor. I think it's tough for him right now.
All right, it's prediction time now, Mr. Ferrara. How
Okay.
many, how many, how many from the league make it? Do three, do four make it? And of those, whatever that number is for you, who are the teams that are playing in that first 12 team playoff?
I'll say four.
Okay.
Look, the SEC, and that's where you're seeing a lot of the projections. I obviously Georgia and Texas, I still feel strongly about. And then after that, it's a matter of who are the other two? Is it Alabama? Is it Ole Miss? I'd probably lean towards those two. I think Tennessee is maybe next up in that conversation. Potentially, it's not an overwhelming schedule.
Right.
They're kind of top heavy with the teams that they play, and Alabama and Georgia, and then Oklahoma maybe third toughest. But then fourth toughest is NC State, and then Florida after that.
Right.
And then they got a lot of
Doable.
teams. They're
Doable.
going to they're going to be favored in at least nine, and they are, according to ESPN, they're going to be favored in 9 of their 12 games. So it can come together if Nico is special, and they had him ranked as the number 92 player in the country. I think that's underselling how good he'll be. Not Heisman Trophy yet, but he's got that potential. But if he is like we think he's going to be, they're going to be in that conversation until the end. And maybe that Georgia game will be, the third loss and then they'll be out. But I think unlike what you see in the preseason projections with Missouri, LSU, maybe in that 5-6 spot, followed by Tennessee, I would say Tennessee, LSU, Missouri is kind of how I would line them up, all sort of in that range. Is that challengers on the outside looking in, but at the moment I would still go with four.
You think either Beck or Dart win the Heisman Trophy?
I would probably say Beck, but man, a lot of times that goes to somebody that we don't think
Yeah.
we're not thinking about
Right.
and has an explosive year. I like Ohio State is going to be there. You can make a great case for them winning the national championship. Probably be them in Georgia in a championship game, but
Guy like Dylan Gabriel at Oregon could be the
right.
guy.
Yeah, and Oregon's going to put up big time stats, but I just don't. I don't know if I trust their quarterback, the Kansas State transfer at Ohio State. I
Right.
don't think he's going to be that good to put up those kind. Howard, I don't think he's going to put
Right.
up those kind of numbers. So maybe if they go to their young 5-star behind him, and then he sets the world on fire, maybe something like that. But yeah, it's boring, but I would still probably say Carson Beck.
Well, Vince Farrar, keep up the great work, man. Appreciate the insights. 99.1 morning show, 6 to 9 a.m. Tell all the fans where they can find you if they're not in the Knoxville area online.
Yeah, appreciate it. Our show is on all the socials: Instagram, Facebook, Twitter/X. It's Sports Talk on 991. My handle is Easy Vince, VINCE Sports. And then the station's website is where all our podcasts are. I keep track of Vols in the NFL. There's 40. I wish the Bucks would get some former
Right.
Vols so I could discuss my Tampa Bay Buccaneers more on our show. There's 40 of them around the league. Obviously, expanded rosters that will come down, but it's still fun to track those and watch preseason games. But our website is where you can find a lot of that stuff too at 991thesportsanimal.com. And high school football, Vols, less than 2 weeks away, opening up with Chattanooga and home, and naming rights and renovations. Is just so much going on in the NFL right around the corner. It was fun to go to a Bucks practice when I was down in Tampa recently. So love my hometown. So best of luck to you in high school football this year, and all the broadcasting you're doing a great job with it, and always fun to be
And they
on
better
with.
hook you up with a national. If they haven't already, they better hook you up with a national championship ring for baseball, man.
I'm not assuming anything, but they have taken care of me in the past with
There you go.
conference championships and trips to Omaha, things like that. That usually takes a long time to turn around.
Yeah.
So we'll see. But yeah, they've been good to me in the past
I better
for
see the
other
pose with the ring on their finger for the national, the natty, baby.
kiss it.
That's it. Keep up the great work. Appreciate the time, and we will see you down the road in
All
the
right, Jake. Yeah,
SEC.
thanks, bud.